My life, for as long as I could remember, was a relentless pursuit of proving myself. I was the older brother, the dutiful one, the one who always tried to do things right. My younger brother, Liam, was the golden child. He was charismatic, effortlessly charming, with a knack for twisting any situation to his advantage. Our parents, kind but often easily swayed by Liam's dazzling smile and quick wit, always seemed to gravitate towards him. If I brought home a perfect report card, it was expected. If Liam scraped by with a C, it was celebrated as showing initiative. I loved my brother, of course. He was my only sibling, my flesh and blood, but there was always a subtle ache, a quiet resentment, a constant feeling of being overlooked in his shadow. Our family wasn't wealthy in the conventional sense, but we had a legacy, a deep-rooted pride in our heritage. Our most treasured asset wasn't money, but a sprawling, dilapidated vineyard, passed down through generations. It was more than just land, it was a symbol of our family's enduring spirit, a promise of future prosperity if someone was willing to put in the grueling work. My grandfather, a man of few words but immense integrity, had always talked about it, his eyes alight with a vision of its revival. He spoke often of passing it down to the one who truly cares, the one who puts in the effort. I always believed that one was me. I spent my summers there, learning the ropes, pruning the vines, getting my hands dirty, while Liam, ever the dilettante, found excuses to be elsewhere. I saw the vineyard as my birthright, my future, a testament to my dedication. My father, a pragmatic man, worked tirelessly in his accounting firm, providing for us, but his heart was in the traditions of our lineage. My mother, gentle and artistic, often found solace in Liam's bright, easygoing nature. They believed in family, in keeping things harmonious, often at the expense of uncomfortable truths. Looking back, the cracks in our seemingly harmonious family were subtle, almost imperceptible to my trusting heart. Liam, even as a child, had a peculiar way of avoiding blame. If a vase shattered, if a cookie jar was emptied, my parents' eyes would almost instinctively drift to me first, even if Liam was the more likely culprit. He'd offer a quick, innocent denial, a charming shrug, and the accusation would simply fall on me, unspoken. I'd learned to accept it, to absorb the blame for the sake of peace, for the sake of avoiding my parents' disappointment. I called it being the responsible older brother. I didn't realize then that these were early lessons in manipulation, rehearsals for a much grander deception. As we grew older, Liam's charm became a sharper tool. He borrowed money constantly, from friends, from family, always promising to pay it back, rarely doing so. He dabbled in various get-rich-quick schemes that inevitably failed, leaving him deeper in debt. My parents, despite their growing frustration, would always bail him out, whispering about Liam's potential, about him finding his feet. Meanwhile, I worked steadily, saved diligently, proving my worth through effort, only to see it go largely unnoticed. My grandfather's health began to decline, and with it, the conversations about the vineyard became more urgent. He wanted to ensure its future. He started spending more time with me, teaching me the old ways, sharing his quiet wisdom. Liam, suddenly, also developed an interest. He started visiting the vineyard more often, asking questions, offering help that often felt more like interference. He'd talk grandly about his vision for the place, his plans for modernization. My parents, excited by his sudden engagement, encouraged him, seeing it as a sign of his maturity. I felt a growing sense of unease, a cold prickle on my skin. Liam's interest felt too sudden, too performative. I always brushed it off as sibling rivalry, a natural competition for our grandfather's legacy. I didn't realize then that these were not just cracks, but gaping chasms, hinting at a truth far more profound than I could comprehend. A consistent peculiarity was Liam's obsession with our grandfather's study. Grandpa kept his most valuable possessions there, antique coins, rare stamps, and, most importantly, the original, hand-drawn deeds to the vineyard, ancient documents that predated modern record-keeping, intricately sealed and protected. Liam would often, accidentally, leave things in there, finding excuses to linger, to be alone in that room. When I commented on it, he'd just shrug, "Oh, just looking for some old books for a project." My grandfather, with his old-world trust, never suspected a thing. I didn't realize then that his interest was sinister, a meticulous reconnaissance for a future betrayal. The most unsettling crack, though, was Liam's subtle questions about my own finances, my bank accounts, my saving habits. He'd ask under the guise of learning from my good example, or getting tips on investing. He knew my habits, my routines, my meticulous record-keeping. I, in my naive trust, shared freely, proud of my diligence. I didn't realize then that my openness was providing him with the very tools he needed to dismantle my life. Grandfather passed away peacefully in his sleep, a few months before his 95th birthday. His will was simple, direct. The vineyard, in its entirety, was to be inherited by me, his eldest grandson, the one who truly understands its heart. Liam was left a substantial, but far smaller, sum of money. My parents explained it away as Grandpa's eccentricities, but Liam's face, when the will was read, was a mask of cold fury, quickly replaced by a fleeting, almost imperceptible smirk. I didn't realize then that this smirk was the herald of my destruction. The climax arrived not with a bang, but with the chilling click of a police handcuff. It was a week after Grandpa's funeral. I was in the midst of poring over the vineyard's old ledgers, planning its future, my heart full of purpose. The police arrived unexpectedly, two stern-faced officers, their presence jarring in our quiet home. They were investigating a report of a substantial theft from my grandfather's estate, specifically, a collection of rare, antique coins he had kept hidden, a secret collection only a few family members even knew about. And, they added, the original deeds to the vineyard were also missing. My blood ran cold. The coins. The deeds. I knew exactly where they were kept, in Grandpa's locked study, a place I hadn't touched since his passing. I stammered, denying any knowledge. But then, the officers' eyes hardened. They had a warrant. They went straight to my bedroom, to a locked chest where I kept my own important documents. I watched in bewildered horror as they broke the lock. Inside, nestled beneath my papers, were the antique coins, the rare stamps, and the ancient, hand-drawn vineyard deeds. All of it. My breath hitched. My heart stopped. My hands flew to my mouth. They were in my chest. How? When? My mind reeled, trying to make sense of the impossible. A cold, bitter dread spread through me, chilling me to the bone. This wasn't a mistake. This was a setup. A frame. And there was only one person who could have done it, one person who knew my habits, my secret lockbox, one person who stood to gain everything if I was out of the picture. Liam. My brother. The officers arrested me on the spot, reading me my rights as my parents, drawn by the commotion, watched in horrified disbelief. My mother's face was a mask of shock, her eyes wide with unshed tears. My father, usually so composed, looked utterly devastated, his mouth open in a silent gasp. But it was Liam's face that seared itself into my memory. He stood just behind our parents, his expression a carefully cultivated mix of concern and sadness, but his eyes held a flicker of something else. A cold, triumphant glint. A fleeting, almost imperceptible smirk. The emotional chaos was instant, overwhelming. Heartbreak for my parents, a searing, guttural pain that twisted inside me, knowing they were witnessing their son being taken away for a crime he didn't commit. Anger at Liam, a hot, venomous rage that pulsed through my veins, consuming me, for his calculated deception, his profound betrayal, his ruthless ambition. Shame, for being so blind, so naive, so utterly fooled by the person I had loved and trusted as my brother. And silence. A deafening, echoing silence in the back of the police car, a silence that magnified the screams in my head. My life. My reputation. My inheritance. My future. All of it, obliterated in a single, devastating moment. The brother I had protected, the one I had always believed in, had systematically dismantled my life, framed me for stealing, and was now poised to inherit everything that was rightfully mine. He hadn't just betrayed me, he had extinguished me. I looked back at the house as the police car pulled away, seeing Liam standing there, beside our weeping parents, his posture almost imperceptibly straighter, his eyes holding that chilling, triumphant glint. He had won. And I was trapped. And that's when I realized, they never loved me the way I loved them. What came after was a raw, visceral struggle for survival. I didn't want revenge that would just burn everything down. I wanted truth, justice, and a chance to reclaim my life, my name, my very soul. I needed peace, and peace wouldn't come from silence or passive acceptance of this monstrous lie. The days that followed my arrest were a blur of cold interrogations, legal jargon, and the chilling reality of incarceration. My parents, devastated and confused, hired the best defense lawyer they could afford, but the evidence was damning. The coins and deeds were found in my possession, in my locked chest. Liam, meanwhile, played the role of the distraught, supportive brother, giving emotional testimony about my sudden change after Grandpa's death, subtly implying my greed. He spun a narrative of a sudden, desperate act by me, driven by resentment over his share of the inheritance. My own family, unable to reconcile the crime with the person they thought they knew, struggled with doubt, a doubt that slowly, painfully, turned into belief. The trial was a public spectacle, a brutal dissection of my character. I was painted as the jealous older brother, driven by envy to steal from his deceased grandfather, to secure the inheritance he believed was solely his. Liam's testimony was meticulously crafted, filled with false empathy, feigned tears, and subtle implications that twisted every past interaction into incriminating evidence against me. He was convincing. My parents, heartbroken, watched from the gallery, their faces etched with grief and confusion. They were caught between two suns, and Liam's manufactured innocence was proving more compelling than my desperate pleas. I was convicted. The sentence was harsh, several years in prison. The moment the verdict was read, my world imploded again. The injustice was a physical agony, a burning wound that festered with every passing moment. Liam, standing beside my parents, offered a brief, sad glance in my direction, a flicker of triumph in his eyes before he looked away, embracing our sobbing mother. He had won. He had perfectly executed his plan. The early days of my incarceration were a descent into despair. I was isolated, stripped of my identity, my future stolen. My parents visited, their faces a mixture of love and lingering doubt. They still loved me, I knew, but they believed the lie. They believed Liam. My appeals were denied. The vineyard, my inheritance, was legally transferred to Liam, citing a clause in the will that disinherited anyone found guilty of a felony related to the estate. He had inherited everything. But despair slowly hardened into a cold, unwavering resolve. I didn't want revenge in the typical sense, not violence, not destruction for its own sake. I wanted truth. I wanted to expose him. I wanted to reclaim my name, my life, and most importantly, my dignity. My revenge was justice. I spent my time in prison meticulously planning. I revisited every memory, every interaction with Liam, searching for the crack in his perfect facade. I remembered old arguments, his past financial troubles, his subtle manipulations, his uncanny knack for knowing my personal details. I read law books, studied criminal psychology, becoming my own detective. My focus narrowed to one thing, finding the undeniable proof, the smoking gun, that would expose Liam's calculated deception. The opportunity came unexpectedly, a whisper from the outside. A former friend of Liam's, also in financial trouble, wrote to me, offering to connect. He had heard the rumors, seen Liam's sudden wealth, and felt a pang of guilt. He knew Liam had been desperate for money, and had hinted at a big score that would solve all his problems. It was a fragile lead, but it was all I had. I leveraged every resource I could find, from legal aid contacts to sympathetic prison librarians. I orchestrated a series of carefully worded letters, sent through third parties, to this former friend, slowly piecing together Liam's past activities, his mounting debts, his desperate search for a way out. I discovered he had secretly taken out massive loans, using my grandfather's anticipated inheritance as collateral, and was facing imminent financial ruin. He needed the vineyard, desperately. The theft was not just about greed, it was about survival, for him. My break came when I discovered a loophole. A new law allowing for re-examination of old cases based on significant new evidence, especially in cases of familial fraud. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but I had nothing left to lose. I worked tirelessly with my legal aid contacts, building a case for retrial. The key was the financial motive, combined with Liam's history of deception, and the precise timing of his sudden wealth and my framing. The actual evidence was subtle, but compelling. I had always kept meticulous financial records, unlike Liam. I had never needed money, never had large, unexplained debts. Liam, on the other hand, had a long paper trail of financial desperation, culminating just before Grandpa's death. I also recalled a specific, hidden camera I had installed in Grandpa's study, a small, discreet device I had used to monitor rare plant growth, not security. I had forgotten about it, dismissed it. But it was still there, dormant. My legal team, armed with this theory, petitioned the court to retrieve and examine that camera. The footage, when retrieved and painstakingly analyzed, revealed the truth. Not a direct confession, but a series of precise, calculated movements. Liam, entering the study late at night, carefully disarming the alarm, meticulously transferring the coins and deeds from Grandpa's hidden safe to my lockbox, then reactivating the alarm, leaving no trace. He had timed it perfectly, knowing my routine, knowing where I kept my own key, knowing how to make it look like an inside job committed by me. The retrial was even more intense than the first. Liam, radiant and confident, still maintained his innocence. My parents, confused and distraught, sat through it again. But this time, the evidence was undeniable. The camera footage, Liam's financial history, the timeline of his debts, the expert testimony on his manipulative patterns, it all painted a chilling picture of calculated fratricide. The verdict was swift and brutal, my conviction was overturned. And Liam, my brother, was arrested on charges of perjury, grand larceny, and obstruction of justice. He stood there, his face paling, his eyes meeting mine. There was no smirk now, only raw, unadulterated fear. He had lost everything. My revenge wasn't about vindictiveness, it was about justice and reclamation. It was about bringing truth to light, about dismantling the lies that had shaped my entire life, and about ensuring Liam faced the consequences of his profound betrayal. He was convicted, stripped of the vineyard, and sentenced to prison. The justice system, slow and imperfect, had finally corrected a grievous wrong. My relationship with my parents was the hardest to mend. They were devastated, not just by Liam's actions, but by their own blind spots, their naive trust. They apologized profusely, tears streaming down their faces, begging for forgiveness for ever doubting me. It was a long, painful road, but with time, therapy, and persistent effort, we began to rebuild our connection, not on the old illusions, but on a fragile, newfound honesty. They learned to see Liam for who he truly was, a manipulative, desperate individual, and they learned to see me, truly see me, for the first time, as the son who had been wronged, but who had fought for his truth. I cut ties with Liam forever. There was no going back, no forgiveness for a betrayal so profound, so utterly dehumanizing. The brother I had loved no longer existed, he was merely a ghost, a stranger, a cruel lesson. The vineyard, my true inheritance, was finally mine. I returned to it, pouring my heart and soul into its revival, tending the vines, nurturing the land, healing myself through hard work and honest purpose. It became my sanctuary, a symbol of my resilience, a testament to the truth. I didn't want revenge. I needed peace. And that peace began to bloom when I accepted that my story wasn't about his failure, but about my resilience. It was about standing up for the truth, about fighting for what was right, about proving that I could emerge from the wreckage stronger, wiser, and infinitely more whole. I learned that sometimes, the greatest betrayals lead to the most profound discoveries about yourself, and the true meaning of family. My journey to truth was painful, but it led me to a profound understanding of who I am, and who truly protects my heart.